there's a lot going on. And before we were talking, we kind of mentioned, you know, some thoughts on some of these bad incidents and some of the things that law enforcement gets a bad rap. And they get a bad rap sometimes because of a misunderstanding in how they do business. And sometimes they get a bad rap because people do bad things. And just like anybody can do something bad, a law enforcement officer is a person and people do bad things. So it only stands to reason that they may do something bad. But I know you had mentioned maybe some thoughts or so forth along those lines. I'd like to hear what you were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think without a doubt, there are people that are in this profession that got into it for the wrong reasons and that are probably just not great people. But I would say that number is very slim. And I think, just drawing on my own personal experiences, that some of these incidents that happen, whether it's bad use of force or, a cop spouting out something that he shouldn't during a traffic stop or whatever, is really a product of the lack of a release valve for cumulative stress, or maybe they had a certain incident, or maybe they're feeling, numb. A lot of these guys, especially those that work inner city, they see just traumatic things on a day in and day out basis, to where really, in order to protect themselves emotionally, they just become numb to it. And not a release valve, something that can decompress or disconnect you and allow you to kind of dump your bucket, eventually something's going to give. And I reflect back on a guy that I worked with down on the Gulf Coast, and after the hurricane, he was a warfighter. He's just a decorated military hero, been through a lot of stuff, and he lost his house. And I remember he asked for a day off, and they brought us in front of the commander at that time, the patrol commander. And the sergeant said, "Hey, so-and-so would like a day off." And basically he just wanted to pick through his rubbish pile to pick up some of his military stuff. And the commander said, basically, "You know what? If they don't like it, then effing McDonald's is hiring." So, I mean, things like that escalated him to the point to where, he was really kind of on the edge. And I think that unless you can decompress and find positive ways to do that, eventually that cumulative stress and that amount of trauma that you may experience may translate into that bad incident, to where they just, not that they can't help it, but just that maybe they've just had enough.
Yeah. And it happens to all of us. And I think that if we don't, and what I mean by what happens to all of us is the cumulative stress part. This is going to traumas, the secondary trauma, the tertiary trauma that can come from going to an incident. Because it's one thing for seeing a scene, and most of us are trained to the point that seeing a bad scene, be it maybe the death of a child or some of the things I've talked about on other parts of my program, that's one thing. And that's actually one thing that most of us are pretty good about being professional about. So it maybe over the years, there's a cumulative buildup. But what I've seen a lot of times is often dealing with, for instance, I had a suicide investigation once. The suicide was one thing. And over the years, absolutely, I'm sure there's some built up trauma from going to that. But dealing with dad of the suicide victim moments after the loss of his son, that's the part that will be with me forever. And if we don't find a way to get a release from that secondary, tertiary type trauma, we can have catastrophic effects.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that you pointed that out, that, people that maybe aren't law enforcement, when you make that death notification, or you're standing with the, mother of a victim or what have you, or, that actually has effect, because police officers, like you said, they're human beings. And that does have an effect. That secondary trauma is real. And I know, and I feel exactly what you just described. I don't know that I'd ever really recognized that until you mentioned it.